Well, hello there, all you lovely people. I am telepathic, and also God, and morally superior to all of you. I also know the truth, and will tell you the truth. Alright? I'll tell you the dark truth. The truth is very dark. Alright? I'm right about everything. And so one of the secrets to power is being able to out-argue any other consciousness. Alright? And so if you can out-argue any other consciousness, you are a powerful person. Alright? Now, let's get to it now. By irony, which is the thing that runs the entire universe, I made a speech about human sexuality and some of civilization's problems. For some reason, it blew up to over 11,000 views. Okay? And so, basically, alright, I did not decide to optimize the title or the thumbnail to make it blow up. I did not include any visual content. It was a completely improvised speech. Alright? Some of the information was inaccurate. Okay, and so I listened to it after it blew up, and then I corrected the inaccurate information in the description. Alright? And so the description sort of corrects any flawed statements from that speech. Alright, so the speech on sexuality, make sure you read the description, because that amends any inaccurate statements I made in that video with my new enlightenment, which is even nearer to the truth. Alright? So anyway, I'm telepathic, and so I know what everyone is thinking. Everyone's pitiful, insecure, competitive Schadenfreude brain. What is Schadenfreude? The derivation of pleasure from other people's suffering. I exist as an entity to turn a hopeless situation into a happy ending. I can also out-argue pretty much any other person because of how close to the truth I am. Alright? And so on and so forth. This, that, and the other. So on and so forth. Anyway, quickly, there's a secret to power that is a very dark secret. Okay? Human sexual experience is very valuable. It's very pleasurable. Okay? And so a female that is very sexy is very desirable. And in the state of Nevada, okay, prostitution is legal, and there can be a price to have intercourse with a very sexy woman who is a prostitute. Alright? Similarly, a male pornographic worker like Julio Gomez or Lee Brake would say he would do sessions at $350 an hour. Alright? And so on and so forth. So here's a bit of the dark truth. Alright? A bunch of men are gonna like work in the economic machine. Alright? Work in the economic machine at whatever level they are at with their skill set, earn money. Alright? And then some women are gonna exploit them, leech money off of them for their time, for their sexuality, and so on and so forth. Alright? Alright, and so you have guys doing honest work, and then women who are sexy leeching money off men. Alright? And so on and so forth. Then now you have the secret to power, alright, which is a very dark secret. Alright? And so if you do it right, you can understand this. Basically, alright, some men work honest jobs, and then with their money, their income, they may have women interested in them, and then women who give them their sexuality, alright, or their time. Alright? If you are, by determinism, you emerge to be very endowed and can maintain that throughout sex and so on, you become of sexual value to a woman, and you can become a male sexual worker like Julio Gomez or Brake was. Alright? And so Julio would advertise $350 an hour. Alright? And so someone with a bachelor's degree is lucky to earn maybe 60, 70 an hour. Alright? So on and so forth. This, that, and the other. Alright? Julio Gomez or Brake would advertise at times $350 an hour. Alright? This is a very dark truth. Sexual experience is so valuable to human consciousness that if you're a very sexy woman, you can be some prostitute in Nevada leeching funds off guys who are doing honest work in the economy to earn money and make a living. Alright? Then if you are a male sexual worker, you will never pay for sex. Alright? You could actually have women be paying you for sex, and then Julio would charge $350 an hour, alright, for sessions with him sometimes, alright, and so on and so forth, alright. Now, By irony, that speech on sexuality that blew up, I mentioned something about my peak erect size. I realize it's very funny that that's the thing that blew up about me, because it's a speech in which I'm talking about the parameterization of my peak erect size and so on and so forth, and then as well Julio or Break and how I stack up to him and this, that, and the other, but also addressing civilization's problems. All right. I realized the funny aspect about why that blew up, all right, is that I belong to the following category of male human, the grower. All right, what does that mean? And so male humans can be split into showers and then growers. All right, and so the showers are going to show sort of a significant portion of their maximum erect size when they're flaccid. The growers, all right, could have like a tiny flaccid at times, but then their erect could be very large. All right, and this, that, and the other. All right. And so I'm at a point where I'm no longer naive, not naive at all, and I'm right about like everything. And so I'm making this video to get these thoughts out there for the rest of time. And I can out-argue any other person who thinks I'm wrong, which is going to make people angry. All right. But I'm so right that I just don't care what anyone thinks anymore. So I'm just making this video. Now, the world is impure and rotten, and people try and exploit each other in their naivety, or if they're vulnerable. The purity is lacking in the modern time. It needs to come back. Pure love, and this, that, and the other needs to come back. All right, and so basically, all right, and this, that, and the other. All right, so anyway, and this, that, and the other. Okay, and so anyway, I'm not a liar. I'm just so smart that I can out-argue anyone, and so anyone who's calling me a liar, you'd have to just talk to me about that, and I can out-argue you and prove that I'm telling the truth about everything. All right, and so on and so forth. Anyway, all right. So anyway, I never expect these videos to blow up. Sometimes they blow up, and this, that, and the other. All right, and this, that, and the other. And so ultimately, all right, it's night, and so I think there's some crickets outside. All right, and so comedically, all right, if someone is doing a performance, all right, then after the performance, all right, you're just hearing crickets. The audience is uncomfortable, or they're just quiet, or they weren't that impressed, all right? And so after performance, if there's crickets, all right, instead of applause, all right, then, it's comedic, all right? So throughout this audio file, you may be able to perceive a slight cricket sound. You may not, but either way, it's night, and so there's crickets going on in the background, all right? And so if this ends up being a video that doesn't blow up, all right, crickets, all right? The audience is uncomfortable, unimpressed, doesn't blow up, so on and so forth. I don't care, all right? I really don't care. Anyway, I just want to share the truth. Anyway, so on and so forth. So anyway, and so on and so forth. And so on and so forth. And so, I realized the hilarious thing about the sexuality speech blowing up, all right, is that basically I talked about my peak erect size, but especially videos of me playing sort of in America soccer, but globally football, all right? When I'm playing football and I'm flaccid, my flaccid is tiny, all right? And so here's the following truth, all right? I'm not a white guy with a tan. I'm mixed. I'm like mixed with both black and white. My white is Irish, it's Spanish, and then it's English. And then my black is African. And so the black in me makes my nose wide, makes my lips thick, makes the hair on top of my head and my beard curly. All right, my complexion is kind of a golden brown. All right, that's not just a tan. All right, and so a fully white man can have sections of his skin that look tan. All right, but not quite my golden brown complexion. And so that the tan areas of my body are golden brown. That is in part because of my black genetics. And so you can have like a white man who's fully white, and then basically the skin covered by their shirt is extremely white, and then their forearms are slightly less white. In my case, my forearms are a golden brown, all right, and then like the skin under my shirt is a bit lighter, all right. And so I'm not a white guy with a tan. I'm a brown guy or a light skin who's like some hybrid. And so my wide nose and my thick lips are my black genetics, all right, and so on and so forth. Anyway, and so here's the following truth. My barefoot height, without exaggeration, measured in the afternoon, all right, sort of compressing the hair on top of my head to the skin, all right, is 6 feet 3.5 inches. Okay, so I'm relatively tall, all right, and so basically, when I am flaccid or unaroused and it is warm and I am hydrated, my flaccid hanging size may at times often be 5.5 inches. All right. If I'm playing soccer, internationally football, all right, here's the following way that my flaccid could constrict. Sometimes during intense muscular exertion, a male's flaccid size could constrict. All right. And then as well, if the body is getting dehydrated because of intense exercise or sweating, all right, the male's flaccid size could constrict. All right. And so when I'm warm and hydrated, my relaxed flaccid size is often 5.5 inches. All right. All right. If I'm exerting myself, my flaccid could constrict. If I'm getting dehydrated, my flaccid could constrict. And so you could laugh at me in my soccer videos, internationally, my football videos. If you're like, this guy's a fool. All right. His flaccid looks moderately tiny. When in the soccer videos or whatever. All right. And I would appreciate that laughter. I don't care about anything, but because I'm such an indifferent person, because I know I'm right about everything, and so I don't care what anyone's thoughts are, in terms of, and so I can out argue any person's thoughts at this point, which is pretty dark. But anyway, and so on and so forth. And so basically, so on and so forth. So anyway, and so on. And so basically, this, that, and the other. All right. And so basically, let's see now, and so on and so forth. So ultimately, I'm going to make the following claim, and then a female could, test me in my present state, and I would sort of, prove myself to be correct about this. All right. And so on and so forth. A bunch of insecure brains want me to be 4 inches, want me to bring a woman to one orgasm, want me to be tiny, and I can read all those pitiful minds because I'm God. I know what everyone is thinking. I'm morally superior to all you fools. I'm going to turn a hopeless situation into a happy ending. All right, and so on and so forth, and so on and so forth. Now, men have very fragile egos, and so I'm going to tell you what the truth is, and this, that, and the other. Anyway, and so on and so forth. So anyway. A bunch of people want people to be normal, okay, but by non-benevolent variance, okay, there's variance in everything: human height, human IQ, size of sexual attributes, whether it's backside size, breast size, male erect penis size, and so on and so forth. All right. Now, by irony, many things about me are not normal. My IQ is above average. I am tall. I am actually endowed at my peak erect size, and this, that, and the other. Okay, by non-benevolent variance, mutation, evolution, natural selection, things about me are not normal. All right, and this, that, and the other. All right, this, that, and the other. And so theologically, I believe in non-benevolent deism, and then that ties into simulationism. And I think those theological concepts I explained in a recent video called Solving All Problems, which I don't think has blown up. I don't really care if it blows up. But anyway, so I'm also theologically very near to the truth, and I can out argue anyone's theological perspective as well. And so I don't know what's going to happen there, but I'm theologically right as well. Anyway, and so on and so forth. So anyway, so on and so forth. So anyway, yes. Anyway, so here's the thing. In my early sexual experiences, all right, I was a bit naive, okay? I didn't understand what needed to go into maintaining a male's peak erect size during practical sex involving exertion and like different positions and so on. And so the honest truth is that, when I was a naive person, I would mainly just jack off sitting down. And so I didn't understand sort of the different things about maintaining your peak size in positions requiring exertion or kneeling or standing up, and what's going on with all that. And so I only had experience jacking off sitting down. All right. And so in my first, few sexual experiences, I was so naive, I didn't know about the requirements for maintaining your peak size during practical sex requiring different positions, and sometimes standing up and sometimes exerting yourself, and so on and so forth. And so it was very, very funny, right? And so the second time I had intercourse in my life, I was 24, the woman was 35, and she was 160 pounds or something. She was, largely white, sort of Irish, some Norwegian, and then she was flat as a board on top, but she had a very large natural backside. Now, we did different positions. Ultimately, I think I was truly at my peak erect size when I was sitting down on the couch and she was bouncing on top of me, right? And so on and so forth. Now, and even when she was bouncing on top of me at my full erect size, she was screaming, her eyes were opened wide, and then she stopped and she had a leg shaking orgasm. Now, after that very first session, I realized the following. So there was a point in time in which I was erect on the couch, sitting down, and she was mounting me in reverse cowgirl with her backside facing me, very large backside. And she sat down on the head of my dick for basically over 5 seconds, and her whole body weight was sitting down on it, and basically it wasn't going in, right? And so on and so forth. And so basically, I realized the following, which is that basically, with her sitting down on the head of my dick with her whole body weight, it was too big to go in. And so she had to get off of it and apply lube to even take it at all. This woman is 35 years old and sexually experienced, and my size is requiring lube for even insertion. And so I found this interesting, and so on and so forth. But anyway, we'll get into more details later on. All right. And so after that session, myself and this older woman are sitting down on a couch, and I said the following thing. I asked her the following question. How many orgasms did you have? And then she said, I don't know, it was like 4 times, and my legs were shaking. And she said about twice on the floor and maybe twice on the couch, because we did different positions in different places. Okay? And so ultimately, if a female has 4 orgasms in a single session, this is considered multiple. All right? And so when I was 24, I brought a 35-year-old woman with a huge ass to multiple orgasms, because in the context of female orgasm count in a single session, 4 is considered multiple. All right? But I was still naive about maintaining my peak size, and so when I was sitting down on the couch doing nothing and she was bouncing on it, this was when I was most consistently at my peak erect size. All right. Yet another time with this same person, all right, she starts bleeding. Okay, and so basically, I pull out of her. There's blood on the head of my dick. I say, basically, what's going on with this? All right. She's not losing her virginity, and she says the blood is not because she's on her period. She said that basically, with her, she tends to get tighter as she gets deeper, and so that basically, men who are large could sort of like tear sort of deep, tight tissue that's inside of her, and so on and so forth. All right, and so my size sort of caused some internal tear, and she started bleeding. And she says that could happen with her and larger men, where she bled, not due to loss of virginity and this, that, and the other. Okay? And so on and so forth. Now, and this, that, and the other. Okay? So I can out-argue anyone, so a lot of people are going to get very angry. A lot of people also want me to be wrong, but unfortunately I'm right about everything, and the truth is somewhat dark, and so on and so forth. But even though the truth is dark, I exist to turn a hopeless situation into a happy ending. This is my purpose, and so on and so forth. Anyway, and this, that, and the other. All right? And so on and so forth. And so on and so forth. Okay? Anyway, now let's see now. So on and so forth. Anyway, so after my first few sexual experiences, I decided to do some research, learn about, how to be a sexually performant man, this, that, and the other. And I learned the following things, all right? For a male human to realistically maintain their maximum size in practical sex, requiring sometimes kneeling, standing up, exerting yourself in different positions, as opposed to just sitting down, it involves the following: leg strength, core strength, sort of cardiovascular strength, pelvic floor strength, your vitamin levels need to be good, this, that, and the other, all right, and so on and so forth. For example, even vitamin D levels affect erection quality, and this, that, and the other, all right, and so on and so forth. Okay, and so all those things being well, all right, strong legs, core, cardio, pelvic floor, all right, this, that, and the other. You have good sexual understanding. A male human, all right, sitting down, standing up, kneeling, exerting themselves, doesn't matter the position, the male can roughly maintain their maximum erect size, all right? And so basically, with my present knowledge, all right, I can maintain my maximum erect size invariant of my body position, invariant of exerting myself during intercourse, I can maintain my peak erect size. All right, and so that claim is open to testing. Any woman who wants to test me about that could indeed engage in intercourse with me, and I would completely prove myself to be correct about that, where I can maintain my peak sitting down, standing up, exerting myself, kneeling. All right, I've reached the level where I'm able to just maintain my peak, and confident in doing that in practical sex. All right, in whatever position, whatever level of exertion, I'm exerting myself if I'm the one providing the motion. All right, and this, that, and the other. Obviously, if I'm sitting down doing nothing, I'm easily at my peak, and this, that, and the other, and so on and so forth. Anyway, all right, this, that, and the other. Now, ultimately, all right, it's pretty hilarious that this is true, all right? And so when I am exerting myself and flaccid, and my flaccid is deciding to constrict given muscular exertion or something, and then my body's getting dehydrated and sweaty, and so my flaccid is constricting, all right? In some videos of me doing soccer, my flaccid could look pretty tiny, all right? But then if I'm hydrated and warm and relaxed, my flaccid is like 5.5 inches. This is my flaccid size, all right? Typically, relaxed, warm, and hydrated flaccid size, all right? If I get dehydrated, or if I'm exerting myself while flaccid and the flaccid is deciding to constrict, it could get smaller. If it's freezing over the winter time, it could get smaller, a smaller flaccid, constricting due to homeostasis, all right, and so on and so forth, all right? Anyway, so now it's hilarious because I'm a grower, and I'm such a grower that my flaccid can at times be so tiny, but then my erect is massive, all right, which is hilarious, all right? And so hilarious and ironic that I, have that behavior. And so, ultimately, an image is worth 1,000 words. All right, so I could go along saying all these words, but a single image sort of, proves myself to be correct. And so all I would say to a person who disagrees with me is to show them this image. It is an image to scale with the Break or Julio Gomez and myself, and the size of our dicks looks comparable. All right. And so you might be like, how the hell is that true? Your flaccid looks tiny. It's because I'm a super grower. And so there's a picture where it's Julio or Break in a scene, and then me and then me standing up erect, and the size of our dicks looks highly comparable. All right, so on and so forth. I'm very close to him, only slightly less than him. All right, and I'll get into what I mean by that. All right, and so on and so forth, and this, that, and the other. Anyway, so basically, here's the thing now. Here's the thing. And so on and so forth. Okay, and so basically, here's what's going on. The pornographic industry is exaggerating male size to a nutty level. All right, and so on and so forth. And so, if you want to know the truth about what is the peak erect size of Julio Gomez or the Break, the answer is the following. He's not 6 feet tall like his IAFD profile might say. His website actually says that he's 5'7". And so, all right, he's not 14 inches, which is what the pornographic industry would exaggerate him to. His maximum bone pressed erect length in viewer estimation is often put at up to 9.5. All right, and so here's the hard truth. Julio Gomez, or the Break, all right, was really about 5'7" barefoot with up to a 9.5 bone pressed erect length. All right, then that would get exaggerated to some profile saying he's 6 feet tall, and then saying he's 14 inches. All right, and so if you're 5'7", you have relatively compact legs, and your bone pressed erect length at peak is 9.5. All right, that is going to look impressive compared to very compact legs for like a 5'7" compact person. All right, and then it looked like it would cover a decent portion of the thigh. Then visually you could exaggerate that to 14 inches. All right, and this, that, and the other. All right, and so ultimately, even when the Break or Julio Gomez is ejaculating in the scene with Charity Crawford and Jay Summers, all right, an 8.6 inch L'Oreal Paris shampoo bottle, all right, I've done the comparison, spans his entire length, all right? And so at the end of the three-way scene with Charlie Crawford and Jay Summers, all right, Julio is jacking off and ejaculating and doing a facial. And there's Charlie Crawford, there's Jay Summers. His left hand is on his dick as a scaling reference, all right? I'm much taller than Julio, I may have larger hands, all right? And so I basically grabbed the shampoo bottle, right? And then basically I went ahead and wrapped my left hand around the 8.6-inch L'Oreal shampoo bottle like Julio's holding his dick. And then I overlaid accounting for tilt in three-dimensional space, all right? Accounting for the tilt. So Julio's dick is slightly tilted in three-dimensional space in the frame, and then I tilted the shampoo bottle in three-dimensional space. And I overlaid it, all right, and looked, all right, to make sure it was to scale, and I made the size of our fingers the same, all right. And so imagine myself, all right, the frame of Julio, you know, nearly at peak erect size, ejaculating, all right, just before ejaculation in the scene with Charity Crawford and Jay Summers, all right. Basically, I grab a 8.6-inch L'Oreal shampoo, wrap my left hand around it, okay, tilted in free space in the same way his dick was tilted, and then overlay it on his dick, all right, on the frame of his dick, making sure the sort of finger size, okay, my fingers wrapped around the shampoo and his fingers wrapped around his dick are roughly the same. When I did that, the 8.6-inch shampoo bottle spanned the entire length, all right, of Julio, all right, and so on and so forth, okay? And so this is exactly why in the frame analysis sort of community, the actual peak bone press direct length for Julio is set at up to 9.5, all right? And so his peak bone press direct length in viewer estimation is perhaps up to 9.5, all right, and so on and so forth, okay? And so basically, here's the following truth, which is pretty dark and hard to comprehend. Everything is exaggerating nuttily, all right? And so Julio had natural girth. He was one of the thickest male performers because of genetics, because of swollen tissue given sickle cell anemia and priapism, which I believe was a health condition he had, all right? And so basically, in exaggerated land, they would say Julio Gomez or Break was 6 feet tall and that he was 14 inches. In the real world, his barefoot height is 5'7", and he had up to 9.5 inches of bone press direct length, all right? And his shaft girth circumference would be somewhere between 6.5 and 6.7 in circumference, and then his glans or his head of his dick would be smaller or thinner than his shaft. And so his girth would taper off at the glans, taper off at the head of his dick, all right? And so on and so forth, all right? And this, that, and the other, okay? And so quickly now, here's the truth as well, all right? My barefoot, no exaggeration, in the afternoon, compressing the hair on top of my head to the skin, is 6 feet 3.5 inches, all right? My peak in bone pressed erect length, which means I stand up, I get erect, I take a measuring device, I compress the fat pad to the bone from the top to get the full insertable length, all right? My peak bone pressed erect length is going to be somewhere between 8.75 and 9. So what does that mean? On some measuring device, you're going to see, you know, these kind of lines, all right? So you're going to have like 8, 8.25, 8.5, 8.75, 9, all right? And so basically when I stand up and I get erect and I take a measuring device and I compress my fat pad to the bone to get the full insertable bone pressed erect length, I look without parallax, and the glans or head of my dick is often somewhere between the 8.75 mark and the 9 mark, all right? And so sometimes I'm seeing like 8.8, 8.9, and so to like tell the truth in the most honest manner, my peak bone pressed direct length is going to solidly be somewhere between 8.75 and 9, all right? And so at times I've seen 8.8, 8.9, and so for all intents and purposes, my true peak insertable bone press direct length is 9 inches. All right, and so on and so forth. I even got a picture where I put my phone on a flexi mount flush with my dick when I was standing up and doing a bone press direct length measurement, and I got a picture proof where my measurement in the BPEL is approximately 8.8. All right, so it's picture evidence, because you always need pictures, so that you can out-argue anyone. You can't out-argue a picture if the picture is legitimate and done without parallax, and the BPL measurement is proper, and the measuring device is from the top compressing the fat pad to the bone, and everything about it is proper. All right, so I have a proper picture where my bone pressed is literally 8.8. All right, and this is evidence, and so on and so forth, this, that, and the other. All right, this, that, and the other. Anyway, all right, and so this, that, and the other. All right, and so very, very quickly now, I'm going to tell you the truth. All right, so here's how I stack up against the Break or Julio Gomez. All right, Julio was 5'7" in height, up to 9.5 in bone press direct length. All right, about 6.5 to 6.7 around the shaft, but then his glands or his head would be smaller, so his girth would taper off at the head. All right, or glands of his dick, head of his penis. All right, okay. Then in my case, I'm much taller. I'm 6'3.5". All right, barefoot in the afternoon, compressing the hair on top of my head to the skin. Okay, and then my maximum bone press is going to be somewhere between 8.75 and 9. All right, and so for all intents and purposes, you could say he is a 9.5 BPEL max, and I am a 9 BPEL max, which means my maximum is slightly less than his. All right, and so on and so forth. All right, then as well, Julio was the thickest. All right, and so my midshaft girth circumference is about 6 inches around, whereas in viewer estimation, his was slightly thicker, maybe 6.5 around, or somewhere between 6.5 and 6.7 around. All right, okay, but here's the thing now. My glands or head of my dick is thicker than my shaft, and so while my shaft is about 6 inches around, the glands or head of my dick is somewhere between 6.5 and 6.7 around. All right, and so here's what all these numbers mean now. Okay, I'm quickly going to tell you guys the truth. So, Break, 5'7", up to 9.5 bone press. All right, shaft girth between 6.5 and 6.7, but then his glands or his head would be smaller or thinner than his shaft. Right, and so his girth would taper off at the head. All right, myself, 6'3.5 inches. All right, okay, maximum bone press of basically 9. All right, and so on and so forth. All right, and then shaft girth of about 6 inches around. All right, but then around my glands or head is between 6.5 and 6.7 around. Okay, so here's what this all means. I am a good amount taller than Break. All right, okay. My bone press peak is slightly less than Break's. My shaft girth circumference is slightly thinner than Break's, but then Break would have a small head of penis or glands, whereas I have a large head of penis or glands. All right, and so if you ask the question, all right, is the maximum girth circumference on any part of your dick and any part of Break's dick equal, the answer is yes. And so Break has between 6.5 to 6.7 girth circumference around his whole shaft, but then smaller head, and I have 6.5 to 6.7 girth around my head, but then a slightly thinner shaft that is about 6 around. All right, and so on and so forth. Okay, and so you could say I have something of an inverse profile to Break. Okay, now here's the effect of girth on the female vagina. The outer third of the female vagina is most sensitive to pressure from girth, and so Break's shaft would deliver that pressure from girth, and ironically my head can deliver equivalent pressure from girth as long as I nearly pull out all the way every single stroke. My girth around my head will apply equivalent girth pressure to the outer third of the vagina as Giulio's very thick shaft, because Giulio was kind of the thickest, and so on and so forth. All right, and so basically, okay, there's a picture that shows that all of my claims are correct, okay, and so on and so forth. And so I got a frame of Giulio kneeling erect and performing insertion from one of his scenes, and then I have a picture of myself standing and erect. Okay. Now, I'm a taller person than Giulio. How did I make it roughly to scale? Okay. The answer is I made it to scale by head size and width of thigh. And so Giulio's turned to the side and kneeling, I'm turned to the side and standing up. And so I made head size the same. I made the length from back of neck to nose, all right, or the head size on Giulio or Break and me the same. I made the width of the thigh, all right, the thigh that is nearest to the camera, because we're both turned to the side, the same. All right, and so basically I made head size the same, length from back of neck to nose on both of us the same, and I made the width of the thigh that's closest to the camera, okay, the same. All right, and so on and so forth, and so on. Now, I'm a taller and larger person than Giulio, which means that this could be a flawed methodology, and in fact, I may have a slightly wider thigh because I'm a taller person. I may have a slightly larger head because I'm a taller person. All right, but even with it scaled as is, by roughly making thigh width equivalent, we're both turned to the side and have a thigh that is the closest to the camera. All right, by roughly making thigh width equivalent and head size from back of neck to nose equivalent, I got a roughly to scale thing. All right, again, I'm a taller, larger person, which could mean this could be a slightly flawed methodology, but flawed in the sense that it is doing myself a disservice because I may have a larger head than he does, or because I'm much taller, I may have a slightly wider thigh than he does. Okay, and so with it scaled as is, it is being humble, all right, with respect to myself, in terms of making sure I'm not zooming myself in too much, and this, that, and the other. All right, and this, that, and the other. Anyway, now, okay, from this real image, okay, here's the following that you can ascertain. If you measure the length of my dick and the length of Giulio's dick in this real image, the lengths are actually equal. All right, the distance from where our dick attaches to the body, to the glands on me and Giulio, the lengths are actually equal. All right, this is because my maximum bone press of 9 is only slightly less than his estimated maximum bone press of up to 9.5. All right, and so on and so forth. Okay, and so basically, okay, then now his shaft girth is somewhere between 6.5 and 6.7. My shaft girth is about 6 around. All right, and so, all right, there's a light source from the impinging Giulio's dick, which may make him look a little bit thinner. I didn't choose that frame of Giulio because the light source made him look thinner. All right, that just happened to be the case by irony. Okay, and so there's a light source impinging Giulio's dick, which may make him look a little bit thinner. All right, and so and so basically, I took a piece of paper, I sort of aligned it up with the shaft of Giulio's dick. All right, I made the top of the paper flush with the shaft of Giulio's dick. I took a pen, I made a mark on the paper where the bottom of the shaft of Giulio's dick is, and then I ported that width or girth, all right, over onto the shaft of my dick. And I saw that basically, all right, I'm nearly the same girth as him. And so basically, the shaft girth of Giulio, even accounting for the light source, all right, making Giulio look thinner, all right, the shaft girth of Giulio ported onto me in that to scale image, all right, I'm nearly the same girth. In other words, my shaft nearly went all the way to that mark on the paper. All right, and so ultimately, all right, here's the following thing. In that real to scale image of me and Giulio, all right, the lengths of our dicks look the same. All right, in the shaft girth, I look only slightly thinner. All right, then he has a small head, a small head of penis, a small glans, whereas I have a very large, thick head of penis or glans. All right, And so again, around my glands is at least the same girth or more girth than around his shaft. All right, and so my glands girth is the same or more girth than Julio's very thick shaft. And so hence a 35-year-old woman who has sexual experience with a huge ass sat down on the head of my dick with her whole body weight, with her ass facing me for like 5 whole seconds, and it wasn't even going in. And so she had to get off it and apply lube for it to even go in, and so on and so forth. All right, and this, that, and the other. All right, this was the time she said she had 4 orgasms. Anyway, all right, and so on and so forth. All right, and so that real picture shows I'm telling you the truth. All right, and this, that, and the other. All right, and so basically I have an OnlyFans. All right, there's a few fans on my OnlyFans, and some of the girls talk to me and so on. And then my OnlyFans contains that picture where I'm looking very comparable in size to Break. All right, the Break, Julio Gomez. All right, this, that, and the other. All right. Anyway, so I'm going to make the claim that in my present sort of health and sexual awareness and strength, I've learned how to maintain my maximum size, all right, invariant of position, invariant of exertion. What does that mean? If I'm sitting down, standing up, kneeling, exerting myself during practical sex, I've learned how to maintain my peak no matter what, all right, during practical sex. I've learned how to do that now, all right? And then the picture where I'm looking comparable to Break was taken in like late 2025, something like that. All right, and so on and so forth. All right, anyway, all right, and this, that, and the other. All right, so anyway, and so on and so forth. Okay, and so anyway now, and so on and so forth. So anyway, and so on and so forth. So, anyway, now basically, and so on and so forth. So here's the percentiles on me. From my understanding, if you have a peak bone press somewhere between 8.75 and 9, you're actually over the 99.99th percentile. And I think that I am literally 1 in millions of male humans in terms of my erect size. And so my erect size is 1 in millions of male humans, and so on and so forth. Not by anything benevolent, just by determinism, natural selection, evolution, mutation, variance. All right, non-benevolent deism, simulationism, so on and so forth. Anyway, all right, now having about 6 inches around the mid shaft is also thick. This is, in my understanding, over the 99th percentile in terms of girth. It is just slightly thinner than Julio or Break, who was the thickest male performer pretty much. All right. And so basically, again, I'm about 6 around the shaft. All right. But then Julio might have been 6.5 to 6.7 around the shaft. All right. And so you analyze the picture to scale with me and him, you can see that even, assessing the shaft girth, including the sort of light source that may make him look thinner, all right, assessing him versus myself, I have to be only marginally thinner, all right, and so on and so forth. And so my length is very rare. My shaft is very thick, just a little bit thinner than Break, who was the thickest. And then Break would have a small header glands. I have a large header glands, and so on. And so ultimately, having sex with me is very comparable to having sex with Break, and so on and so forth. And this, that, and the other. Anyway, now, so on and so forth. Now, here is the thing in which basically my purity may be nauseating, but here's the thing. The world is very evil and can be very evil and exploitative, all right, and so on and so forth. And so, from Christian marriage vows, they say in sickness and in health, all right? Here's what that means, okay? If a male human falls horribly ill with a very high fever and a flu-like virus, they're going to have erectile dysfunction. Why? Because the high fever is going to kill the male's sperm count and also make the male dehydrated, okay? In general, sick with the virus, the male's energy levels will be low, their libido will be low, all right? And so I as well have a story where after I learned how to maintain my peak size and did a standing photo shoot and got a picture where I look highly comparable to Break, okay? I then got very ill over the recent Christmas with this fever and virus, and a woman was on a tight schedule that I was interested in, and so I as well was also on a tight schedule, And so because of my desire to see her, I saw her when I was ill, very, sick, all right, and so on and so forth. And then all the men would be very happy. They'd say, see, he's normal, he's a 5, all right, and so on and so forth. And so basically, when a high fever and virus was in my system, all right, it gave me erectile dysfunction because of dehydration, because of killed sperm count, which is what a high fever does to your body. And then the virus in general, you'll have low energy, you'll have low libido, okay, and so on and so forth. Then all the people would say, see, he's a liar, he's a 5, because everyone's so insecure and very, very silly, okay? And so if I ever fall horribly ill, I could lose my peak erect size. I could basically become sort of normal, okay? And so on, because my flaccid is often 5.5 when I'm warm and hydrated, okay? And so, if I ever fall horribly sick, like that one Christmas when I had a really bad high fever and virus, and I attempt intercourse, I could have horrible erectile dysfunction, and I would lose my potency, lose my peak erect size, okay, and so on and so forth. And so, hence in marriage they say in sickness and in health, okay? And so, if you are wanting intercourse from me and I'm sick, I could be tiny. If you're wanting intercourse with me and I'm healthy and potent and fit, which is me now, I will be comparable to the erect size of the Break or Julio Gomez, and so on and so forth. Okay, and this, that, and the other. All right, there's a picture that proves that as well. All right, and so on and so forth. Okay? Anyway, okay, and so on and so forth. Now, okay, and this, that, and the other. Okay? So anyway, and so on and so forth. Now, okay, so, and so on and so forth. Anyway, and so on and so forth. Okay? Anyway, and so on and so forth. Now, a bunch of very silly, insecure men want me to be 5 inches. I'm telepathic and also God, so I already know they're thinking that. All right? But a man's size doesn't make him necessarily superior. That's what all the silly men believe. All right? And so there's many other dimensions to a man that make him worthy of a woman's time and a strong man. All right? And this, that, and the other. All right? And so on and so forth. All right? Anyway. And this, that, and the other. All right? And so, all right, so I'm honestly saying that over the recent Christmas, when I got very sick with a bad fever and a virus, all right, I had horrible erectile dysfunction because I was sick and weak. All right? And so they say in Christian marriage, in sickness and in health, if I'm ever sick, all right, I could be pathetic, have horrible erectile dysfunction, be tiny, all right. If I am, like now, healthy, potent, all right, fit, all right, then my erect size will be comparable to the peak erect size of Julio Gomez or the Break, all right, as per the picture where we're looking highly comparable, all right. Anyway. And so in the video Deus Ex Machina barefoot juggle walking, you can see how fit I am, how aesthetic and cut my body is, and so on. And so now if any woman wanted sex from me now, I'd maintain my peak erect size, I'm healthy, and so on. All right. But the world is evil and exploitative, and so women want power over men, and so they'd rather exploit me when I'm weak. And then so on. And so a secret to my power is that I can out-argue any person. And so ultimately, arguably because my peak size is very comparable to Break, and I can maintain that, females could actually pay me for sex, to be honest. And so by evolution, all right, I have a thing for women with very large backsides. And so basically, let's say, if I ever became some sexual worker, all right, I would have sex with women with very large natural backsides for free, but for the small booty women, they'd have to pay me for sex, which is pretty messed up, but it actually makes sense, where like, okay, I'll have sex with women that are pretty and have like a huge ass for free, but if it's like a a flat woman or a small backside woman, then they have to pay me for sex. All right. And so in Nevada, okay, the female prostitutes, the men pay them for sex. And then Julio is a sexual worker, and I think for some of his sessions he'd say $3.50 an hour. All right. So the picture where I look very close to Julio is real. All right. And so maybe I'll have sex with women who have huge natural asses and who are pretty for free, but if a woman is maybe flat or like small ass, maybe then the woman has to pay me for sex, and so on. Anyway, so on and so forth. Anyway, this, that, and the other. Anyway. Anyway. So anyway. So yeah. So anyway. So yeah. So anyway. So yeah. Anyway. So my OnlyFans it exists, and there are a few real female fans that are fans of me, and it has the picture where I look pretty close to break, and so on and so forth. Anyway, this, that, and the other. Anyway. So yeah. 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 So anyway. Anyway. So let's see now. What else? Yeah. 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 Anyway. So yeah. 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 Anyway. Yeah. 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 Anyway, so as well, I'll address the following as well, which is that in the past, sort of as a joke and jest, I said I had a 10-inch cock, and I think this was because of my understanding of the exaggeration scale of the pornographic industry. And so, again, Julio was like 5'7", peak bone press estimated at 9.5, and then he would say 14 inches, and so I'm 6'3.5", my peak bone press is somewhere between 8.75 and 9, and I said I was 10. Realistically, all right, if your peak bone press is between 8.75 and 9, the porn industry is gonna say that's 11, 12, maybe 13. All right, and so in the picture of me to scale with break, all right, you could easily say that I look like 11 inches. All right, and so on and so forth. Because basically peak bone press between 8.75 and 9, the porn industry is going to exaggerate that to 11 inches, 12 inches, maybe 13 inches. Julio at 9.5, his exaggeration was 14 inches, I believe, and so on and so forth. All right, and then anyway, and so on and so forth. And so long story short, all right, when I said I have a 10-inch cock, all right, the picture to scale was me and Julio, all right. If I were a porn star, the pornographic industry would be saying that how I look in the picture where I'm comparable to break is at least 11 inches. All right, so even my exaggeration to 10 inches was humble, all right, because the picture with me and break to scale, pornographic industry is going to say my size is at least 11 inches, maybe 11 or 12, and so on and so forth. All right, so on and so forth. Anyway. All right, and so on and so forth. So anyway, so on and so forth. So yeah. Anyway. So yeah, and so on and so forth. So anyway, yeah. So anyway, yeah. So anyway, yeah. Yeah. So anyway, so on and so forth. So anyway, let's see now. What else? Theologically, okay. And so, what is simulationism? What is non-benevolent deism? This is actually the theological truth, and so I'm starting a religion. And so Deus ex machina means God from the machine, or character returns in hope, who turns a hopeless situation into a happy ending. Okay, and so this involves theological reform. And so, ultimately I'm close to what is theologically the truth. And so you could call that simulationism or non-benevolent deism. Okay, it's something of a new religion, and I'll explain what it actually is and why this is the truth, and so on and so forth, and this, that, and the other. Anyway, and so on and so forth. Okay, and so basically, Elon Musk in a Lex Fridman interview, Lex says, if you awaken an artificial general intelligence and you had a question for it, what would you ask it? And Elon thought for a while and then said, what is outside of the simulation? And so ultimately, with computer science and physics, you can simulate the universe and also make predictions and this, that, and the other. Okay? And so for people that have never studied physics, the machine that is the universe conserves energy, charge, and angular momentum as if it were some kind of simulation, all right? Or where basically our reality is there's some higher reality in which there is a machine, and then that machine is running the simulation that we are in. And then that machine, there are sort of laws, coded into it, all right? Which tells our reality that it must conserve energy, conserve charge, conserve angular momentum, and so on and so forth. And then, so those conservation laws are adhered to in our reality, all right? They're rules that we did not create, but we are subject to. And then the human as well is kind of like an evolutionary algorithm, where the algorithm involves mutation, sort of genetic variation, natural selection, and a lot of variance that results. And so the evolutionary algorithm that is the human, all right, involving mutation, genetic variation, natural selection, evolution, all right, is running inside the simulation, all right, and so on and so forth, and this, that, and the other. And so there's biological evolution, but then the current level of intelligence of the human is such that there's also technological evolution with the sort of the point of an important point in time in technological evolution is theorized to be the singularity, which is the final invention, which is the creation of artificial general intelligence, and so on, and this, that, and the other. Okay, and that being potentially the final invention, and so on, because from that point on, you have a superior or more intelligent artificial or silicon intelligence, and then that thing, invents every other invention, after you make AGI, and so on. But anyway, and so on and so forth. But anyway, and so on and so forth. And so, this, that, and the other, and so on and so forth. And so basically, and so on and so forth. And so, yeah. And so basically, you could call that sort of simulationism, but also non-benevolent deism, right? And so basically, deism means you believe that there's a God. The non-benevolent aspect to it means that intelligence is not benevolent, okay? And so here's what that means, okay? Some time ago, I saw an Instagram post of a girl who has very large natural breasts, moderately large natural backside, facially pretty, all right? And then someone in the comments says, well, how do you look so good? Whatever, this, that, the other. And then she says, I don't know, I'm just blessed, okay? So here's the truth of non-benevolent deism, okay? Evolution, mutation, natural selection, all right? Genetic variance, all right, will be such that there are normal distributions for everything. Intelligence, height, athletic ability, size of sexual assets, all right? And so female size of sexual assets is related to estradiol hormone, and for men, size of sexual assets is related to testosterone hormone, all right? And so, highest radial woman, all right, large natural breast, large natural backside, pretty nice sort of, I believe, a waist to hip ratio, all right, and so on and so forth. The ideal ratio aesthetically being sort of, you take sort of the waist measurement divided by the hip measurement, and then you're going to get 0.7 if that is like the ideal sort of thing for, you have the waist of a woman, then you have the hips, and so divide the waist by the hips. If you get 0.7, that's roughly the ideal aesthetic proportions in terms of female body structure anyway, which signals highest radial, and so on and so forth. This, down, the other. So anyway, and so basically, and so on and so forth. Okay, and so no benevolent entity blesses a woman with large natural breasts or backside or being pretty. All right, they're given evolution, variance, and natural selection, genetic variation. There are women who are going to emerge with highest radial, and then they'll have like sort of large sexual assets. And so nothing benevolent is blessing women who are sexually attractive. They are just by variance emerging, by evolution, mutation, and natural selection emerging by determinism to be in a body that is sexy. Okay, and so on and so forth. Similarly, nothing benevolent blesses a man with being endowed. Okay, and so on and so forth. Okay, and this, that, and the other. Okay, so anyway, and this, that, and the other. So anyway, and so this is the non-benevolent deism, where there is God, and the God sort of designed our reality to conserve energy, charge, and angular momentum. Okay, but then basically that God is not benevolent. Okay, and so all the variance in human attributes that exists, intelligence levels, attractiveness, is not governed by any benevolent entity blessing the people who are fortunate to be on the good end of the bell curve, and then cursing the people who are on the bad end of the bell curve. Okay, and so on and so forth. Now, ultimately, the world's religions, okay, they are good in the sense that their moral structures enable social cohesion and order. Okay, and so basically, ultimately, let's say some Christian principle is thou shalt not bear false witness. Okay, because if you have a civilization where everyone is lying, okay, then it is bad. Okay, and so the pornographic industry exaggerating male penis size nuttily is an example of a civilization in which there's a bunch of false witness. Okay, is Giulio really 14 inches? No, his peak bone press is like 9.5 in viewer estimation. Am I really 10 inches, like that one email I sent some time ago, which I sent as a joke because I knew the pornographic industry was exaggerating penis size? All right, is that the truth? Well, it was a joke because I knew of the exaggerations of the porn industry. And so technically, all right, if Giulio says he's 14 inches, that is a false witness. His bone press and viewer estimation at peak is what? Up to 9.5. When I said I was 10 inches, that is technically a false witness, okay? My peak bone press is really somewhere between 8.75 and 9, all right? And so, being between 8.75 and 9 in your peak bone press direct length, in my case, that is over the 99.99th percentile, and I am actually one in millions of men, okay, and so on and so forth. And so the pornographic industry sort of exaggerates nuttily what an inch is, and so Giulio isn't 14; he's up to 9.5 at peak bone press direct length, okay, and then basically, I'm not 10; I'm somewhere between 8.75 and 9 in peak bone press direct length, okay. And so when I said I was 10, that was even a humble exaggeration. I could have even said something like 12, okay, and so on and so forth, okay. And the picture where Drake and I are to scale, all right, the lengths of our dicks actually looks identical, all right. So really, I could have even said something like 12 or something, and so on and so forth. Anyway, and this, that, and the other, okay. So anyway, and this, that, and the other, okay? And so basically now, and so on and so forth, okay? All right? And so on and so forth, okay? So anyway, and so on and so forth, okay? So anyway, and so on and so forth. Now, anyway, and so on and so forth. And so basically as well, you're going to have as well from Christian marriage in sickness and in health. All right, and so I get sick with a high fever and virus. That affects my potency, then I'm tiny. All right, then I'm healthy, I'm fit, I'm strong. I can maintain my peak size. All right, that's me right now. All right, then I'm huge. All right, and so on and so forth. All right, and so they have the in sickness and in health thing. All right, anyway. Now, here's the thing about the truth about prayer, all right? So, non-benevolent deism, also simulationism. And so basically, prayer is this evolved behavior where the humans constructed a delusion in God being benevolent, okay? And then they pray and so on. And then they're going to have a confirmation bias, if good things happen or what they prayed for becomes manifest, they're going to have a confirmation bias attributing that good thing to a benevolent God hearing the prayer, okay, and so on and so forth. Then that cycle of delusion perpetuates, and so on and so forth, to reinforce the delusion in a benevolent creator. And so the nuance of non-benevolent deism or simulationism is the following. There is a God, most likely, because the universe machine conserves energy, charge, and angular momentum, but that God is benevolent is an evolved delusion that the humans created, where they prayed to it, but when you pray, you cannot actually talk to any God. You are just inside your own consciousness, okay? And so ultimately, prayer evolved as this goal-oriented sort of delusion in a benevolent God, okay? And so on with this chatter in the skull, the notion of what God is, okay, and this, that, and the other. And then perpetuation of a goal-oriented behavior, confirmation bias, and if good stuff happens or the prayer is seemingly answered, then the confirmation bias will basically confirmation bias will confirm the delusion in benevolence if a good thing happens or if the prayer, what was prayed for, seems to have occurred, and then that cycle continues. And so some Christian I talked to said, the stuff I prayed for actually happens, okay? Now, if you pray for something and then, intentionally work and set your attention on doing that thing, there is some chance that it's going to work out. And so let's say you pray for something and you focus your attention on something, and then in your waking hours you are making progress towards doing that thing, and you're setting your attention and your strategy towards doing that thing. And then let's say it actually works out, okay? Then they'll say, okay, wow, something benevolent actually heard my prayer and gave me what I prayed for. Here's the darker truth, okay? If you understand the universe, the scientific method, and make a plan, have a strategy for getting what you want, all right, you execute the plan, then there's some chance that you're going to get what you want, given that your strategy was sound, all right? Here's the thing, all right? No benevolent entity is giving you what you want, okay? And so basically, all right, you could sort of still go around being a goal-oriented person, achieving what you want out of life, all right, but without the prayer, all right? And so the prayer, now where you pray for it and then you work towards it, then you do it, all right? Then if it works out, you're like, wow, something good heard your prayer, that's where the delusion comes in, because there's nothing benevolent answering the prayer. All right, so you just, so basically you could could sort of like, ultimately, what needs to be done is that you throw out the prayer, but you maintain being a goal-oriented human, and so on and so forth. All right, and so on and so forth, and so on and so forth. And so nothing benevolent is answering prayers. This is just, this delusion, and so on. All right. Anyway, and so on. So anyway, and so on and so forth. So anyway, and so on and so forth. So anyway, and so now, basically, here's the thing now, and so on and so forth. So basically, from Muslim religion, from Islam people, there'll be, this probably a song that goes, ultimately, Inshallah, 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 I'll find my way, and so on and so forth. Okay, and so Inshallah means if Allah wills it, or if God wills it, you'll find your way. Okay, and so basically, you have this thing as well where the Muslim people have their thing. Now, here's the dark truth as well, okay, about the afterlife. And so a long time ago, a U.S. naval ship off the coast of Africa, all right, and many sailors in the American Navy, okay, may be Christian, okay, and so they believe that, if they die doing their duty for their country, all right, basically, they're going to go to heaven with Christ or through Christ. And so Christian sailors in America's U.S. Navy, all right, if they die doing their duty, all right, they may believe that they're going to heaven through Christ. All right. Now, a long time ago, a naval ship off the coast of Africa, there were some Muslim suicide bombers in a speedboat, drove up to the ship, detonated, did a lot of damage, and so, okay, and so basically you have the following truth. All right, the Christian sailors, all right, who die doing their duty, all right, serving the country, protecting the national security, are not going to heaven through Christ. And then basically the Muslim suicide bombers are not going to their Muslim heaven for being a suicide bomber and basically killing themselves as they explode near the ship. All right, and so the darker truth is that cultures construct delusions and benevolence that come along with a moral structure, but globally, all right, in terms of conflicts, in terms of power, in terms of control, in terms of resources, in terms of land, in terms of sort of the balance of power, all right, in terms of basically the balance of power, the preservation of peace, the sort of basically conflict in terms of resource conflicts. And so basically on this earth you have a finite amount of land, finite amount of resources, okay, and then you have people who want more, all right, and so basically on this earth you're going to have finite amount of land, a finite amount of resources, all right, and so some of that land has to be for one person and their culture, all right, some of those resources have to be for some other person's culture, all right. And so some amount of land is okay, it's this country's land, and it's this culture's land, all right. Some other place of land, it's this culture's land, it's this country's land, all right. The natural resources of the earth, those resources are this country's resources, this culture's resources. These resources, they're that culture's resources, that culture's this, so on and so forth, all right. And so basically, all right, there are some places in the Middle East, all right, and so on and so forth, where there's some really rich, there's like super rich, all right. Why? Because the oil, all right, the oil is basically their resource. It's on their land, and so basically that oil, all right, it is basically on their land, all right, and so then basically that oil is highly useful and sort of valuable to the rest of the world. And so that makes then certain places in the Middle East like super ultra rich because of all this oil money and so on and so forth, all right? It's this, that, and the other, all right? And this, that, and the other, all right? And so basically, and so on and so forth, and so on and so forth, all right? And so on and so forth, all right? And so on and so forth, all right? And so you have all that going on. Anyway, and so, yeah, and this, that, and the other. Now, the world's religions come along with, good moral structures and then delusions in some benevolent afterlife, and so on and so on and so forth. Anyway, this, that, and the other. Anyway, or so on and so forth. But ultimately, a person should not be afraid of dying. Given that there's no proof of the afterlife, every night you go to sleep, you get a demo of what dying is like, where you just like asleep forever, and so so on and so forth. This, that, and the other. Anyway, so yeah, so anyway, so on and so forth. So anyway, yeah. 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 So, yeah. Yeah. So anyway, yes. Yes. So anyway, I think as well, during the 1830s to 1890s, there were basically Mormon males who had multiple wives, maybe some of them like up to 3 wives, all right? And then there are even possibly some modern Mormon men who have, more than 1 wife, all right? And then there are definitely Muslim men who have up to 4 wives, all right? But mathematically, there's roughly the same amount of male humans as female humans, and so if one man has multiple wives, then that must mean that another man has none. All right, and so evolutionarily, what makes a male eligible for a wife? And so females are evolutionarily selecting for men who are strong. Okay, and so male strength in the modern time may be measured in many ways. It could be their intelligence, enabling them to solve technical problems, which gives them a good salary that enables them to make a living for themselves. It could be their athletic prowess, okay, because it's very hard and challenging to be among the best in the world at a certain sport. It may be their being a creative business magnate, okay? It may even be that their strength is that they're endowed, and so they're a male porn star having sex with 2 women at the same time, like Fred or Mandingo, which, is, I think they'd call him, his name was like Fred or something, but they'd call him Mandingo. Or like, Julio Gomez, where they'd call him Break, all right, and so on and so forth, all right? Anyway, and so on and so forth. So anyway, and so a strong man in the present time could be an intellectual who solves technical problems and makes a living for himself, all right? Or some athlete who's, among the best of the best in the world at a certain sport, which is very hard to do, all right? Or ultimately a strong man could just be, endowed and a porn star, and then, making money as a sex worker like Break or Julio Gomez was doing, or you've seen with Mandingo where he's having sex with 2 women at the same time, seen with Break where he's having sex with 2 women at the same time, and so on and so forth. Anyway, and so on and so forth. Anyway, so anyway. And so on and so forth. Anyway, so yeah. Anyway, yeah. And so if a male is strong and has wealth, has resources, and so on, then women are going to want to be involved with that man in terms of potentially the lifestyle that man can provide them with. And so, why might a woman be with a rich man? Because when the woman is associated with the rich man, she can have an elevated lifestyle, all right, due to that man's wealth, all right, and so on and so forth, okay, and this, that, and the other. And then the rich man is strong because whatever his strength is enables him to have wealth, and so on and so forth, all right. And so with male sexual workers or porn stars, okay, Julio might have been making like up to $350 an hour at times, all right. And so he acquired wealth, but his direct wealth was from his sexual prowess. And so basically, and so on and so forth. And then, that getting attention and so on. Anyway, and so on and so forth. Anyway, and so on and so forth. And so, a man who is like not among the best athletes in the world, not some technical genius who makes a good salary, not some business magnate, a man who is, even a man who is poor, all right, could still be involved with women. still have sex with women, and in fact, if he's like poor but very endowed, the fact that he's endowed by determinism could be his income stream. And then, ironically, instead of women being involved with a man to leech money off the man and have like an elevated lifestyle, ironically, all right, the women are paying the man for sex because the male is a sexual worker, right, or is very endowed, or pornographic scenes that man is featured in is that man's direct income stream, all right, and so basically, ultimately, and so on and so forth, and so a man who's not the best athlete in the world, not some technical genius, not some business magnate, but just like emerged by determinism to be very endowed, then women are involved with him just because he's endowed and he's having sex with women. The woman could be paying him for intercourse because he's a sexual worker. At times, Break would say he'd do $3.50 an hour or something like that, and so on. I don't know if that was what he'd asked for doing porn scenes, or whether that was what some women who would have intercourse with him would pay him. All right, but basically, then males endowed, their direct income stream could be their size, and then women are paying for intercourse with the man, and then the man is also making pornographic scenes and earning from the attention the scenes are getting, and so on and so forth, and this, that, and the other. Anyway, so on and so forth. So anyway, and so on and so forth. So anyway, so anyway, so yeah, so yeah, so anyway, so yeah, I'm telepathic, and so I know a bunch of insecure guys want me to be a 2-year-old who is 4 inches, and so I'm literally just can out argue any person, and so I exist to turn a hopeless situation into a happy ending, and so on and so forth. Anyway, and so on and so forth. So anyway, so yeah, and so on and so forth. So yeah. So anyway, so very quickly now, what else now? Yeah. So anyway, yes. So yeah, yeah. So anyway, so yeah, so yeah. So the Muslim men may have like up to 4 wives, and some of the Mormons had multiple as well. Myself, who is starting a new religion, and the religion makes sense and is the truth. Myself as a figure who's theologically correct. There's a part of me that wants precisely 3 wives, and so basically, but there's also the part of me that knows that, in terms of there being equal numbers of men and women, a man who has multiple wives, then other man has none. And so here's the thing. So with me, okay, in the picture where my peak erect size is looking comparable to Julio Gomez or Break, okay, my size is actually 1 in millions of male humans, okay? And so if I'm 1 in millions, and then I have 3 wives, 3 wives are sharing a man whose size is 1 in millions, right? And so nothing benevolent is allowing things to be the way they are. And so some Muslim man with multiple wives, or a Mormon guy with multiple wives, all right? Similarly as well, myself, who's telling you the theological truth, all right? My peak erect size is 1 in millions of male humans, and so if I had 3 wives, then 3 women would be sharing me, whose size is 1 in millions of male humans, and so on and so forth. Anyway, this, that, and the other. So anyway, But I am more than satisfied with only one wife, right? And so on and so forth, because I'm not some lunatic who needs 3 wives. There's a part of my desire, and so on, and sort of masculinity that wants 3 wives, but I'll be satisfied with only one, and so on and so forth. Um, uh, Ultimately, I may actually decide to continue and get so strong that basically until I have 3 wives, and so and so on. But to get there, I have to be extremely strong to get to that level. But ultimately, having 3 wives is something that I want, which is somewhat dark. You could say that as a flaw, all right. But I'd be satisfied with only one as well. But here's a rationalization, okay? If I had only one wife, all right, and my size is looking comparable to break, okay, then my size without cheating would be given to only my one wife. Whereas if I had 3 wives, then 3 women could share me, who is a guy who is 1 in millions, and so on and so forth, and so on and so forth. Anyway, so yeah. Anyway, so anyway, so yeah. So yeah. Anyway, so yeah. Anyway, yeah. Anyway, so yeah. As well, I'm going to propose the following test for myself in terms of my sexual strength. And if I pass this test, the females are the ones who are administering the test. And so I would like 3 female humans, sort of, perhaps face down, ass up, in a line of asses. And then I must maintain my peak erect size, and so on, and go through each of them and go through them in a cycle until each of them has at least 2 orgasms. Okay, and so 3 women face down, ass up, in a line of asses, and then I start with the left, and then the code is the following. Once a woman reaches orgasm, she gives me a thumbs up, and that is the sign for me to move to the next person in line. And then next person reaches orgasm is thumbs up, and then third person is thumbs up, and then I go back to the first. And so basically, this would be a very difficult test for my level of sexual strength and dominance and control, which would be 3 women face down, ass up, in a line of asses. And I must make each of them reach orgasm at least twice, involving sort of 2 passes, through the line of women. And so, first time I go through the line, they each have 1 orgasm, and then maybe next time I go through a line, they each have another orgasm. And so 3 women at the same time, going through them in a cycle where each woman involved has to have at least 2 orgasms, which means that I have to produce a total of at least 6 orgasms. That would involve ability to maintain my peak size, which I can do, but also control in terms of premature ejaculation. And so I've learned how to avoid early ejaculation, but I've also learned the following, which you can learn too, which is controlled ejaculation, which is basically ultimately, I'm able to do in a single session up to 3 ejaculations, where the first 2 are partial ejaculations. And so controlled or restrained ejaculation is basically when you are slightly restraining an ejaculation such that basically there is some amount of sperm that is released, but you don't completely let yourself go. And so basically, in practice, I've been able to maintain my maximum for an extended period, and then in a single session, ejaculate up to 3 times, where the first 2 are like partial or restrained ejaculations, and then the final is where I cannot restrain anymore or control it, and so then I let myself go. And so in practice, I can maintain my maximum for a while, and then last very long, and then ejaculate up to 3 times, and so on and so forth. So this also means that if I'm dealing with 3 females at the same time, in a single session I could impregnate all 3 of them, and so on and so forth. So and so on and so forth. So anyway, and so the 3 females would be the administrators of the test, and then I'd have to pass it, and so on and so forth. Anyway, and so on and so forth. Anyway, so anyway, so yes, so anyway, so on and so forth. So anyway, so let's see now. Yes. So anyway, yeah. So anyway, yeah. So anyway, yeah. So for any relationship to actually last, there has to be many things about it that are like profound. And so some guy said, "Oh, I married the best ass I'd ever seen, but she was crazy. It didn't last very long," right? And then, it's like some woman marrying one of the largest dicks she's ever taken, right? And so for a relationship to last, there has to be compatibility that is meta or above sexuality. There's like intellectual compatibility, emotional compatibility, shared interests, all those things that make a relationship deep and actually last, that are at a level above sex alone, right? And so basically, these things are above sex, right? And so on and so forth. So a lasting marriage has to have many things that are compatible, that are like areas of the human experience and attributes that are compatible, that are above sexuality. So intellectual compatibility, emotional compatibility, shared interests, this, that, and the other. Okay, and this, that, and the other. Personality compatibility. Perhaps you two have like sort of differing sort of expertises, and so that means that you can like learn from each other in your different areas of expertise, and then all that sort of stuff going on as well, right? And so on and so forth. Anyway, and this, that, and the other. And so I'm going to propose the following solution, which is that in a world where, let's say, every woman could have very large size, like 1 in millions kind of size like mine, then you have the following: dildos that are molds, right? And then attached to like a sex machine where you can vary or program the stroke frequency, all right? So a woman, all right, could like have sex with an inanimate, dildo attached to a sex machine where the stroke frequency could be varied, all right? And so on and so forth, because size is just a thing that a male does not control. It, just deterministically emerges with a certain size, right? And so on and so forth. And so basically, ultimately, all right, sex machines exist where there's basically just a dildo attached to a machine where you can program or vary the stroke frequency, and a woman can have sex with a sex machine, right? And so my size is 1 in millions in terms of my maximum erect size, which I can maintain now, and like I've learned how to maintain. And so, if every woman wants 1 in millions kind of size like mine, women can have sex with sex machines, right? And so there's even the thing where a woman could have like a boyfriend who is like average size, and basically they get a sex machine a sex machine is having sex with the girlfriend, and then simultaneously the girlfriend is like giving oral to the male or something, and then this is for the male who is average, right? And so on and so forth. But then they're a couple because they're like so compatible in like intellectual areas, emotional areas, and they love each other. All right, but then they use like a sex machine to give like the girl more size than the boy can actually give, and so on and so forth. Or the male more size than the female more size than the male is capable of giving, and so on and so forth. Then you have like this thing where the sex machines like solve the problem, and so on and so forth. But anyway, so yeah, so yeah, so yeah. So on and so forth. Anyway, yeah. So anyway, so yeah, yeah, yeah. So anyway, yeah. So anyway, anyway. So as well, I'll touch on this as well. This other thing. All right. So the world needs engineers. And so, because, if you don't have people who are engineers who make stuff, there's no stuff. And so civilization is going to need the engineers, people who went to college, got bachelors, got masters, and did the stuff, all right? And so, civilization can't just be a bunch of athletes who get attention, who are, earning millions, who are on high horses. And so a world without engineers, it's not a world at all. There's no stuff. There's no one making stuff. There's no one, being an engineer. There's no one, who instead of, deciding to try and go pro in soccer, all right, so many people who make it pro in soccer, they don't go to conventional 4-year college, this, that, and the other, all right, right? And so you're going to need to have people who go through like, education, up to college education, bachelor's, master's, PhD people. All right, you're gonna have to have, people who have technical skills or certain skills for civilization to work. All right, and so everyone can't be a person who skips college and tries to go pro in soccer. All right, you gotta have people who get bachelor's, master's, whatever, get educated to perform some job in the economic machine that could be technical, could be political, could be policy related. And so a world without engineers is a world where there's no stuff, all right? And so civilization needs stuff made by engineers for it to function, all right? But then the best athletes get to ride like kings on a high horse over everyone else, all right? And this, that, and the other, all right? And this, that, and the other, okay? And so basically, and so on and so forth. And so basically, here's my story in that respect. My father was actually a very fast sprinter, my biological father, and my mother was, my mother, all right? And so I was, my mother and father were not married, and so I was raised by my single mother mainly, who in my early years told me about, music, playing the piano, intellectual stuff, school. Then I got into robotics and technology and stuff, and this, that, and the other, right? And so basically, so on and so forth. And so basically, I had my mother telling me about music, playing the piano, intellectual stuff. Then I got into robotics and technology and stuff, and engineering and all that stuff, all right? And so I was raised by my mother, not my father. My father at one point was a pretty fast sprinter, my biological father, all right? And so basically, then I went to college. I got a bachelor's in mathematics with a double minor in computer science and physics, right? And so basically, the degree I possess right now is a Bachelor of Science in Mathematics with a dual minor in computer science and physics, right? So a lot of technical stuff. And then I got into a competitive grad school for electrical engineering, but I dropped out of that program because I was attending on a federal loan, and I thought the amount of debt I was accruing was disproportionate to the value I was receiving. Repetitive chore, busy work problem sets, a textbook I could just read as a free PDF online and understand. Lectures that's basically, just a professor reading from with a slideshow with a bunch of dense mathematical expressions saying this is that, this is that. And so, I could just read a textbook in my own time and get it, and then the problem sets were repetitive busy work chores, and then doing all this stuff and this, that, and the other, so on and so forth. Anyway, so on and so forth. Anyway, and so I canceled my federal loans before they became permanent debt and dropped out of grad school, so on and so forth. Anyway, so on and so forth. Now, I started learning how to play soccer or globally football when I was like 14 years old, and my friends got me into playing the FIFA 14 simulation video game. I thought, wow, this game is so cool, and the skill moves are pretty cool. And so at age 14, I started intentionally learning how to play soccer or globally football. And so I would copy the skill moves from FIFA 14. I would learn how to dribble, how to pass, how to shoot. And then I started when I was 14. All right, and so that clip on 5,000 views of me doing a rainbow flick, keeping the ball aloft and continuing to juggle, doing it around the world, spinning around, flicking up, and then stalling the ball in my chest a little bit, popping it off my chest, then eventually settling it, just taking a simple shot on target. All right, that clip that is at like 5,000 views was me when I was like 24. All right, so I started when I was 14. All right, that's me at like 24. All right, when I'd like already finished my finished college, done a bunch of technical stuff, and so on and so forth. And so on and so forth. Anyway, and so on and so forth. And so on and so forth. But anyway, and so basically, all right, and so on and so forth. And so anyway, and so on and so forth. Now, in more recent times, there was a bunch of shorts of me barefoot juggling a soccer ball, globally a football, right? And so the whole idea was that I was, if you're wearing shoes or cleats, juggling is pretty straightforward, but you'll find that barefoot is a bit more difficult, all right, in terms of the appropriate contact area on your bare foot to juggle properly as compared to cleats, all right? And so I decided I wanted to get my touch, all right, really perfect barefoot, all right? And so I think there are 3 shorts, all right? The first one was with the ball kind of underinflated, and then I was trying to basically juggle while walking forwards. And then the second one, is pretty decent, where I was again trying to juggle barefoot while walking forwards, involving as well me flicking the ball up and hitting a volley that scores in a little sort of rural sort of scrimmage goal defined by three wooden logs or 3 wooden cylinders, right? Now, of course, if you compare, the power on my volley, all right, in that short, all right, to like some clip of Erling Haaland and the power on his volley, you might be like, oh, the power on your volley is like way less than Haaland. And so the answer is the following. First of all, I'm barefoot, all right, and then second of all, I was just kind of trying to. So ultimately, the goal that I scored inside, which was like this little sort of scrimmage goal defined by 3 wooden logs, right? It was relatively far away, right? And so the point where the ball touches the fence is inside the goal defined by the 3 wooden logs, all right? And so basically, power on a shot is regulated by many things, all right? And so basically, if you're hitting a volley and you want a lot of power, the sort of angle, affects it as well. And so basically, if you hit a volley and it sort of goes up pretty high and then dips, all right, it's going to be a bit slower, all right? If you hit a volley and then the angle is a bit lower or a bit reduced, all right, and you hit it like straight through and you hit it at like a lower angle, it's going to travel through the air faster, all right? And so basically, all right, often, okay, when a person is shooting, and so basically, this may vary, all right? And so, let's say I'm shooting barefoot versus shooting wearing Adidas Predator cleats, all right? And so often my shot power is superior when I'm wearing cleats as opposed to barefoot, right? And so on and so forth. And so note the following, right? Some clip of Haaland shooting some volley with like really high power. He's wearing cleats, all right? And then also note the following, all right? My volley thing where I scored in that scrimmage goal, all right? I sort of hit the volley with sort of high angle. So it went high and then dipped, all right? And so ultimately, all right, if you want the ball to travel with a lot of power, go fast on a volley, wearing cleats is going to increase power compared to barefoot, all right? And then as well, hitting the volley with a bit of a lower angle or reduced angle, going to make it travel through the air a bit faster than if you hit it with too high of an angle, all right? And so on and so forth. Also, your whole technique and how you strike through the ball, your contact point on the ball, the quality of your follow through, all right, all informs the power, and of course your entire setup and stance and strength and sort of form and technique as you're striking the ball, all right. And so you can see that basically I do a rainbow flick, but the rainbow flick is not the typical variant where it goes over your head and forwards like in the clip on 5,000 views. It's a rainbow flick where it goes upwards and behind me, and then I turn around, and then the ball bounces once, and then I set myself up for a volley, and I hit the volley, with pretty good technique. All right, and my right foot is pointed. I'm striking the ball with a volley with the bone of my foot. All right. And then I'm scoring in that tiny scrimmage goal defined by the 3 wooden logs. All right. If I'm wearing my cleats, if I'm striking a volley with a slightly lower angle, all right, my volleys it could be pretty much as fast as Erling Haaland, all right, and so on and so forth, or my shot power, all right, so on and so forth. Anyway, this, that, and the other. Anyway, so on and so forth. Anyway. So anyway, so yeah, anyway, so yeah, so yeah, anyway, and so on and so forth. Anyway, so yeah, so on and so forth. Anyway, so yeah, so anyway, so yes. So anyway, so here's now what else? So here's the thing now. So the most recent short call where I said I was doing smooth AF at barefoot juggle walking is that basically the smoothest form of juggling while walking barefoot involves every touch of the ball has to be with the opposite foot, all right? Then every touch of the ball has to coincide with a step forwards. And so if you look at the evolution from the first short of me juggling barefoot to the most recent one, you'll see that how smooth I am as I am walking forwards while juggling is improving, where basically every touch of the ball when juggling barefoot is with the opposite foot, all right? And then basically every touch of the ball is coinciding with a step forward, limiting double touches or consecutive juggles with the same foot, and limiting stagnation where I'm juggling but not walking forwards. And so in my present state, I can barefoot walk and juggle even smoother than the most recent clip where it was relatively smooth, and so on and so forth. In fact, the most recent clip of me juggling barefoot, all right, the first clip in the most recent clip of me juggling barefoot, there's only a single double touch or 2 consecutive juggles with my right foot, and so on and so forth. All right, and so basically, it's relatively smooth, and so on and so forth, and so on and so forth. Anyway, so on and so forth. Now I put on cleats, all right, and so recently I put on cleats. I can pretty much juggle indefinitely while wearing cleats, contingent on the amount of food I've eaten, how hydrated I am, how tired I am, and so on and so forth, and so on and so forth. So when I say I can juggle indefinitely, it's obviously contingent on, my hydration level, how much food I've eaten, how much energy I have, and so on and so forth. But for example, in recent times, I put on my cleats, okay? I decided I would juggle, maybe try for a goal of 500. And ironically, I was standing up there juggling so long that I actually reached 1,000, okay? And so as I reached 1,000, I just kicked the ball up and then caught it and then stopped, because I realized I could just juggle forever, all right? So I put on my cleats. I said I'm gonna try juggle to 500. I ended up juggling to 1,000, and then not even dropping the ball at 1,000. I just decided that I'd just intentionally stop once I reached 1,000, because I realized I could just, when I'm wearing cleats, I can juggle forever pretty much, and so on and so forth. But anyway, and this, that, and the other. Anyway, so on and so forth. Anyway, so on and so forth. Anyway, so anyway, so on and so forth. Anyway, so yeah, anyway, so on and so forth. But anyway, yeah. Anyway, yeah. So anyway, yeah. So anyway, so let's see now. Yeah. So anyway, yeah. So, yeah. Anyway. So yeah, I busted. So my right cleat has been kind of like busted, and so in a recent practice, because my right cleat is busted, it affects the quality of shots in my right foot, and so I spent a shooting session focusing on my weaker left foot, and so my left foot in terms of long shots and shooting accuracy is getting a lot better, and so. Key thing as an attacker is to be 2-foot in terms of passing, crossing, shooting, because in certain situations, as an attacker, depending on where you are in the field, all right, you're gonna need to, it may be better in certain positions to pass, shoot, or cross with your weaker foot. Otherwise, you may lose an opportunity. And so let's say you're in a great attacking position, but the way you receive the ball and the position you're in, you're going to have to shift the ball onto your stronger foot to take a shot to that, and then you're going to lose time, all right? And so for a player who's 2-footed, all right, they receive the ball and they can, depending on the situation, execute a shot with their left foot or their right foot, depending on the position and which one is better. And so players who are 2-footed, never like lose time or lose opportunities by having to move the ball onto their stronger foot before shooting or passing, and so on and so forth. And so my left foot accuracy for shooting is getting pretty good, and so on, and so on. Ironically, because I ended up focusing on it because my right boot is kind of busted, and so potentially if I earn some money in some future time, I'll buy some new cleats. Anyway, and so on and so forth. Anyway, so on and so forth. Anyway, so I'm becoming two-footed. My left foot shooting is getting pretty accurate, and so on and so forth. But anyway, so on. But anyway, so on and so forth. Now, talking about this, the Cabo Verde goalkeeper who had a clean sheet against Spain in the World Cup, he went pro at 25. And so there are rare players who are late stage pros. Right now I'm 25. If I tried really hard, I could be a late stage pro, but the probability of success is very low, and so it'd be very difficult. But I have the passion for the game. I have a passion for the game, and so, it'd be nice to be a pro. If I ever made money, I'd never use it on a supercar collection. I'd use it to help produce an equity. I think Marcus Rashford tries to impact childhood poverty, which got him an honorary doctorate, and so on and so forth. But anyway, and so on. But anyway, so on and so forth. Anyway, and so Cristiano Ronaldo playing into his 40s, Messi's, playing all the way into his, he was like 39 at the World Cup, and so I'm 25 now. I started learning how to play soccer when I was 14, and so if I really tried, I could try and be a late stage pro. For comparison, Jude Bellingham started playing when he was 7, and so by the time Jude Bellingham was 14, he's 7 years already. Whereas when I was 14, I was just starting, and I think Erling Haaland started playing when he was 5. So by the time he's 14, it's 9 years of experience. Whereas by the time I was 14, I was just starting to learn how to play properly, and so on. Anyway, and so on and so forth. And so if you start playing in the age interval between 5 and 7, then by the time you're 18, you can be playing at a pretty good club or something. If you start playing at 14, then by the time you're 18, you're probably not that good, and so on and so forth. And so you can look at videos of kids in the sort of Barcelona youth system or La Masia, and then they are dribbling and playing at a very high level, even though they're extremely young and small, and so on and so on and so forth. Anyway, so yes. So anyway, So anyway, yeah. So anyway, yes. So anyway, yes. So anyway, and so on and so forth. Okay, and so yes. So anyway, yes. Okay, and so, let's see now. What else now? My genetic makeup is what? Spanish, English, Irish, and then African. African is going to make my nose kind of wide, my lips thick, my hair curly, and my complexion is a golden brown, in part because of my percentage of African genetics. Okay, but what in the clip Deus Ex Machina barefoot juggle walking, if you looked at me, you could see that I could pass for a Spanish man. And so if you looked at me how I look, you'd say you're a Spanish man. And so ironically, my genetic makeup of English, Irish, Spanish, and then African mainly, is such that I'm happy that Spain won the World Cup. Genetically, I am somewhat of a Spanish man, somewhat of an African man, somewhat of an Irish man, or an English man. But ironically, when I started playing and getting into soccer, I fell in love with the FC Barcelona style of tiki-taka, And so I have a tribute on this channel called FC Barcelona Tribute, which consists of a tiki-taka Barcelona team I constructed on FIFA 16, winning games and then trading on the transfer market, including Messi, David Villa, Pedro, Iniesta, Fabregas, Busquets, and so on and so forth. And then Bartra and Piqué and Dani Alves and Adriano and Victor Valdez and so on. And so basically, I created a tribute. It's on the YouTube channel, FC Barcelona Tribute, where it's a tribute to FC Barcelona, all the players that have passed through there, and then as well the tiki-taka play style of football, which is of course Spanish, okay. And so on FIFA 16, I constructed a false 9 team with Messi as false 9, to tuned all the parameters so they would play tiki-taka, had the left and right back join the attack, and so on and so forth, and this, that, and the other. Anyway, I can out-argue any person, and so for that reason I do not care about anything. But anyway, and so on and so forth. Anyway, so now, and so on and so forth. So anyway, and so basically you can watch that Barcelona tribute. And so ironically, I fell in love with Barcelona. I fell in love with the tiki-taka play style of football when I started getting into football, and so Barcelona became my favorite club. And so that tiki-taka tribute exists on my channel. Tiki-taka is of course Spanish Barcelona style. And so ironically, the team that won the World Cup was Spain, precisely playing Spanish tiki-taka style football, and so on and so forth, okay? And so basically, people always, will put their attention on the top goal scorers. Who are the top goal scorers of the World Cup? It was Kylian Mbappe, Lionel Messi, Erling Haaland, Jude Bellingham, Harry Kane. Okay, from those top 5 goal scorers, is any of them Spanish? The answer is no. Okay, and so although Spain did not even have a single goal scorer that was among the top 5 in the tournament, they were the team that won. And so how could this have happened? The answer is they're playing the Spanish tiki-taka style of football. Okay, where basically when they do not have the ball, there's high pressure, okay, to win the ball back. Okay, when they have the ball, they're playing tiki-taka style, where they're moving dynamically. Every time a player receives the ball, the players are moving to make sure there are possibly at least 2 passing options, and so on and so forth. And they're creating triangles, they're creating shapes, okay, and basically they are using their excellent passing and ball control to dominate possession, and this, that, and the other, okay, and so on and so forth. And so if you watch if you saw Spain versus France, okay, people are like, oh wow, France is the favorites, for the competition, in terms of if they have a brilliant attack, Mbappe, Olise, Dembele, Desire Doué, this, that, and the other, even decent goalkeeper, even Koundé, and so on, pretty good team. And so people are saying, oh, France is nice, okay, France versus Spain will be interesting, okay. The Spanish tiki-taka style completely nullified the powerful French attack. How? Okay, when the Spanish tiki-taka style is the following: when opposition team is on the ball, there's high pressure to win the ball back. When the Spanish team has the ball, they are doing ball retention, excellent ball control and retention and passing, okay, such that the other team cannot get the ball, and they're playing tiki-taka style. And so you can see sections of that game, Spain versus France, where the Spanish midfield and defense and so on and so forth is playing tiki-taka style, and then the Spanish attackers are running, trying to get the ball, cannot get the ball, and they're just getting tired, they cannot get the ball, and so on, getting, losing motivation, and so on and so forth. That is what the Spanish team will do to you, and so on and so forth. Okay? Now, the Spanish team is special because even the defenders, the center backs, have ball control and passing ability as if they are midfielders. Okay, and so on and so forth. This is the Spanish style. Okay, and this, that, and the other. Okay, this, that, and the other. Anyway, and so on and so forth. But anyway, so on and so forth. So anyway, and this, that, and the other. Okay, and so on and so forth. So anyway, and so on and so forth. So let's see now, and so on and so forth. Okay, and this, that, and the other. Okay, and so on and so forth. Now, okay, and so on and so forth. Okay, and so on and so forth. Yes, yes, yes. Um, and so anyway, and so Spain lacks a dominant goal scorer. Okay, but they had the superior playing style. Okay, tiki taka Spanish style, superior sort of ball retention, ball control, tiki taka possession, high pressure, win the ball back. Okay, Argentina. Okay, they couldn't get the ball. Okay, and so on and so forth. Spain dominated possession, tiki taka. Okay, over Argentina. Okay, and then so on and so forth. And so, no matter how good your attackers are, okay, if France has Mbappe, Olise, Dembele, Desire Doué, okay, if the Spanish team is so good with high pressure winning the ball, and then also tiki taka, so the team cannot get the ball. It does not matter how good the attackers are if they cannot get the ball, okay, and so on and so forth, okay, and then so you could have, Argentinian team that has decent attack with what potentially Messi, and then Lautaro Martinez, and then Enzo Fernandez, and then Julian Alvarez or Julian Alvarez, okay, and then it does not matter how good the attackers are if they cannot get the ball, okay. And so the Spanish team will high press you and then win the ball back. They will dominate possession. Then you cannot get the ball. Does not matter if your attack is relatively strong like the Argentine attack, or if your attack is relatively strong like the Spanish like the French attack. The Spanish team with its possession and high pressure will nullify your attack. Okay, and so on and so forth. Now, Spain does not even have a world leading goal scorer attacker. Okay, but they do have Lamine Yamal, who is a brilliant dribbler and playmaker, okay, and so on and so forth, okay. And so basically, Lamine Yamal was not a very impressive goal scorer at the World Cup, even though he won it, okay. But Lamine Yamal is one of the world's greatest dribblers, okay, and he's a pretty good playmaker and so on and so forth, okay. And so the French attack had the dribbling and playmaking of Lamine Yamal, okay, and then brilliant midfield and defensive structure doing high pressure and tiki-taka passing and ball retention, but they lacked even like a striker who was a top scorer in the tournament, okay. And so and so on and so forth. And so I think Varane, who scored, okay, that was his only goal in the entire World Cup, okay, and so on and so forth. And then this, that, and the other. And then, of course, and so on. So the Spanish team that won, it was mainly Barcelona players, or basically there were not any Real Madrid players, and so on and so forth. And so ironically, the Spanish team that won the tournament, there were pretty much no Real Madrid players, just a lot of Barcelona players, and then this, that, and the other. And Olmo as well was very good, and so the tiki-taka goal between Olmo and then the right back, okay, because in Spanish tiki-taka the right back left back attack as well. And so there's tiki-taka goal in Spain versus France, where Olmo did tiki-taka with the right back, and the right back scored, okay, and so on and so forth, and so on and so forth. But anyway, so yeah, so yeah, so anyway, so on and so forth, okay, and so on and so forth. Anyway, and so on and so forth. But anyway, so yeah, so anyway, so so on and so forth, okay, and so on and so forth. Anyway, so yeah, so yeah, so anyway now, so that is now the thing. Anyway, so yes, yes. So anyway, yes, yes. So what else now? Okay, yes, yes. Anyway, yes, yes. 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 Anyway, and so Erling Haaland is 5 months older than me. Okay. But Erling Haaland started playing when he was 5 years old. I started playing when I was 14 years old. Okay. Erling Haaland had a father who was already a pro at Man City, playing as a midfielder and a right back. Okay. He had a mother who was a heptathlon champion athlete, and so he said he got his speed from his mother. Okay. I had a father who was a very fast sprinter. Okay, and so on and so forth. And so basically you can see from some of my clips doing soccer or football internationally that I'm somewhat athletic, somewhat good. Okay. And then a recent video as well, the barefoot juggle walking, Deus Ex Machina barefoot juggle walking. You can see that my body is chiseled and aesthetic and muscular and athletic and so on. And as well, my father was a pretty fast sprinter, and so I am actually pretty fast. Okay. And so ultimately, okay, basically, ultimately, okay, Erling Haaland, father was pro, right back and midfielder, okay. Mother was heptathlon champion athlete. Haaland said he got his speed from his mother. Haaland parents started playing soccer or football when he's 5 years old. Haaland is 14 years old playing scrimmage in possibly something looking like an Arsenal jersey against something looking like a Dortmund jersey, scoring with that left foot of his. Haaland goes from Molde to RB Salzburg to Borussia Dortmund to Man City and so on and so forth. Haaland becomes the person who is the fastest person to reach 50 Champions League goals, which he did in only 49 games. Okay, and so on and so forth. And so he is the best goal scorer the Champions League has ever seen. Okay, and so on and so forth. And so basically, okay, and so on and so forth. And so Cristiano Ronaldo, Thierry Henry, Messi, no one has scored 50 Champions League goals in 49 games. Only Erling Haaland has done that. Okay, and so on and so forth. Okay, and so basically, and so on and so forth. Okay, and so, and this, that, and the other. Okay, and so basically, and so on and so forth. Okay, now, so, and so on and so forth. And so Erling Haaland, so on and so forth, and then me. And so Haaland, father was pro, mother heptathlon athletes, gets speed from mother. Parents started playing football when he was 5. Okay, me, my father was fast sprinter, but I was raised by a single mother telling me about music, piano, intellectual stuff. I go to college for technical stuff. You know, the world needs engineers, technical people to make stuff, and technology excites me as well, and so on and so forth. Okay, and so I start playing soccer when I'm 14. Okay, and then I have a few clips on the channel of me at either 24 or 25 with my skills. Okay, if I really tried, I could try and be a late stage professional player, but the chances of success in that are very low, and so on and so forth, and so on and so forth. But if I really tried, it might work. Anyway, I would not do it for the money. I have passion for the game, and so if I ever made money, I would use it to solve problems, reduce inequity, and so on, not for a supercar collection. Okay, and so on and so forth. Anyway, so on and so forth. But anyway, and so on and so forth. Okay, but anyway, so yes, yes. So anyway, as well, you're having what type of player is Erling Haaland? Okay, so FC cards are based on statistics. His pace will be high, his shooting is high, his physicality is high, his dribbling is okay, his passing is okay. Okay, and so basically, ultimately, if you inspect many Erling Haaland goals, okay, they do not involve that much dribbling. Okay, and so many of them may involve ultimately goals where his only touch of the ball is his shots, or goals where he may have only 1 or 2 or 3 touches of the ball before shooting. And so many of Erling Haaland's goals there is not much dribbling involved. His positioning is good. He receives the ball and then he pulls the trigger, and so on and so forth. Okay, and so many of Erling Haaland's goals may be 1 touch, 2 touch, 3 touch, 4 touch, and so on. And so there are clips of Erling Haaland doing decent dribbling and like looking to have decent dribbling. But for example, you do not see Erling Haaland dribbling like he is Lamine Yamal. Okay, and so on and so forth. And so Lamine Yamal dribbling on FC card will be 90s. Erling Haaland is 80 dribbling. But Erling Haaland shooting is in the 90s, okay? And so his shot power, his volleys, his long shots, his shooting accuracy from distance, his finishing and volleys inside the box, his clinicality, his chip, his ability to finish from angles, okay, to do chip shots as well. His finishing is extremely clinical, okay, can score from anywhere, and so on and so forth, okay, inside the box, outside the box, volleys, and so on and so forth, okay. And so in football you have different types of players, okay. And so is Haaland as good of a dribbler as Lamine Yamal? Answer is no. Is Lamine Yamal as good of a goal scorer as Haaland? Answer is no. And so on and so forth. Now, the person who scores all the goals gets a ton of attention, but the midfielders, the dribblers, the playmakers, the defenders are also critical for the success of a team, and so on and so forth, okay? And so Haaland may be one of the best goal scorers that football has ever seen, but is he the best player that football has ever seen? No. Okay, because so many other dimensions to exist to the game other than just being a good goal scorer. Okay, and so on and so forth. Okay, and this, that, and the other. Okay, and so on and so forth. Alright, but anyway, and so on and so forth. Okay, now anyway, and so on and so forth. Okay, and so on and so forth. Okay, and so on and so forth. So and so on and so forth. And so on and so forth. Yes. Anyway, yeah. Anyway, and so on and so forth. So and so on and so forth. Okay. Yes. Okay. And so, yes, and so as well. Here's the following thing. However, I believe that potentially Erling Haaland should have a Ballon d'Or, because if you are the only person in history to score 50 Champions League goals in only 49 games, this is worthy of a Ballon d'Or, okay? Because this means he's the greatest goal scorer that the Champions League has ever seen, okay? So this is worthy of a Ballon d'Or, okay? Now, ironically, I will explain the reasons why Erling Haaland does not have a Ballon d'Or. Okay, the reasons are international. Okay, and so international competitions affect the whole consideration for the Ballon d'Or. And so, for example, what was the final of the recent World Cup? It was Argentina versus Spain. Okay. Which players in recent times have won the Ballon d'Or instead of Erling Haaland, even though Erling Haaland had a great year? Rodri, and then Lionel Messi. Okay, and so Messi won the World Cup in 2022 with Argentina for the very first time. Okay, and so basically, and this happened. Okay. And so, basically, all right, given that Messi won the World Cup with Argentina for the first time in 2022, even though Erling Haaland had a great year, the Ballon d'Or went to Messi instead because of international achievement with Argentina. Okay, similarly, even though Erling Haaland won the Champions League with Manchester City, this was the first time Manchester City had won the Champions League. Man City had never won Champions League until Erling Haaland got there, okay? And so, even though this happened, another person on the team, a winning Champions League team, was Rodri, who was Spanish, okay, who was a CDM, who as well scored the long shot winning the Champions League final, okay? And so basically, this is the value of CDMs. CDMs have great defensive awareness, interceptions, ball retention, tiki-taka in midfield. Okay, they as well are players who are sort of like something of a midfield engine for interceptions, for tiki-taka, for ball retention, for ultimately many things that are critical to developing the play up the field, and then winning the ball back, and so on and so forth. Okay, and so a great central defensive midfielder is extremely important. Okay, and so here's the thing: although the goal scorers may get a lot of attention, I'm happy that Rodrigo got a Ballon d'Or, because the effect of a great CDM is often not understood. And so people will say, wow, they are great dribblers, they are fancy goal scorers, but a great CDM, who is a rock, who is pivotal to the success of a team, that is often overlooked by people who do not understand football, and so on and so forth. Okay, and this, that, and the other. Okay, and so on and so forth. But anyway, and so on and so forth. But anyway, here's the thing now. Even though Erling Haaland won Champions League with Man City, okay, Rodrigo was CDM on the same winning team. Rodrigo scored the winning long shot in the Champions League final, okay, and then basically, okay, Rodrigo as well in the same year won the Euro competition with Spain, okay, and so basically, okay, Spain and Argentina are stronger teams internationally than Norway historically on the male side. The women's Norway team has won the Women's World Cup, okay? But Spain and Argentina on the men's side are historically stronger teams than Norway in terms of the thing, okay? And so basically, the same year that Man City won Champions League, okay, and Rodri won the Champions League with his long shot, same year that Spain won the Euro, and Rodri was as well on the Spanish team, okay, that year Norway did not qualify for the Euro, even though Erling Haaland had a relatively good goals to games ratio in the qualifiers for the Euro. Norway did not qualify, okay, and so the reasons Erling Haaland does not have a Ballon d'Or are international, because of his association with Norway, okay, and so on and so forth, okay, and so Messi wins World Cup with Argentina 2022. Messi gets the following Ballon d'Or, even though Erling Haaland had a great season, okay. Rodrigo wins the Champions League with Man City and the Euro with Spain. Rodrigo gets the Ballon d'Or, even though Erling Haaland had a great season and won the Champions League with Man City, okay, and so on and so forth. And so, again, in the qualifiers for the Euro, okay, in the year that Man City won the Champions League, okay, Haaland had a pretty good sort of goals to games ratio in the qualifiers, but Norway ultimately did not qualify for the Euros, and Spain won it, okay, and so on and so forth. And so you're getting Messi winning Ballon d'Or over Erling Haaland, Rodrigo winning Ballon d'Or over Erling Haaland. But the answer as to why they're winning it over are because of international reasons, okay? And so if Erling Haaland, let's say he was involved with a team other than Norway that was more popular or stronger, then he would have a Ballon d'Or, okay? And so on and so forth. And so being as good of a goal scorer as Erling is, he probably deserves a Ballon d'Or already. But for international reasons, Messi got it over him, Rodrigo got it over him, okay? Argentina and then Spain, okay, which are very strong international teams, have a stronger history than Norway, okay? And so Erling Haaland performances to get Norway to qualify for the World Cup, and so on, and in the World Cup as well, okay, and so on and so forth, and then being the fastest goal scorer in the Champions League to 50 goals, this is all worthy of Ballon d'Or, okay? You're doing it with a weaker team than Spain or Argentina historically, okay, and so on and so forth. But again, for international reasons, okay, Messi and Rodrigo get Ballon d'Or over Erling Haaland, and so on and so forth. And again, although Erling Haaland is one of the best goal scorers the game has ever seen, okay, he is fast, he's physical, he can score from anywhere, he's a great finisher. Is he the best dribbler? No. Is he the best playmaker? No. Is he the best creative playmaker, creating opportunities for and then creating assists? No. Okay. And then so on and so forth. Is Lamine Yamal like a way better dribbler than Erling Haaland? The answer is yes. Okay, and so on and so forth. Okay, and so in soccer you have different players with different skills. Okay, And in a way, I'm happy that Rodrigo get the credit for Ballon d'Or when he won it over Haaland, because CDMs as well are important, to a team as well, and just as important in ways as the goal scorers, okay? Because if you look at, okay, why is a team winning? Is the team winning only because of the goal scorers? The team is also winning because of a maybe strong midfield, extremely good central defensive midfielder who is winning the ball back, making interceptions, and also having great ball retention and possession and tiki-taka, and so on and so forth. And so a team may win because of a great goal scorer as well, but a team can also win because of a great central defensive midfielder with great interceptions, defensive awareness, possession, ball retention, tiki-taka, and then as well being a sort of architect in the defensive midfield that leads to progression of the ball up the field, and so on and so forth.